I don't think we need to specifically budget for that. And the way I would view it is the budget as it's currently prepared, the expected revenue that has been budgeted is greater than the expected expenditure. So there is a little bit of a cushion there, but the overall operating reserve of the main fund, which is 406, which is about $1 million, that's what I would view as the reserve. Okay. So if a future project comes up, you would know whether you could afford it or not based on what we currently have in that fund's reserve, if you will.
Okay, great.
So I don't think, if I could add one thing, I don't think adding a specific line item for that reserve would be necessary.
Well, it sounds like we've already got a reserve by the fact that we have, because of where the revenues sit currently.
And that would be, of course, in addition to, we do have a debt service reserve fund on the bonds that were drawn on the Pendleton Pike TIF anyway, that's mandated under our indenture and trust agreement. So that's already set aside in case there are shortfalls there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of times in public budgeting where you want to try to build up a reserve is to avoid some practice of reversion to a general fund or something like that, and to be able to essentially hold on to money from year to year. But we're a sort of a self-contained unit. I mean, there's nothing from any of our accounts is going to revert to the city general fund as of the end of any time, and so essentially the unencumbered balance in our general operating account is our reserve.
Yes.
And the amount of that will roll over from year to year and get bigger as long as our revenues exceed expenditures for any particular year. So I guess the only thing I would say is that if there was something particularly beyond the end of the current fiscal year that we thought we needed to reserve against, that would really probably be about the only other reason that if we know, if we were to anticipate that next year or the year after that or something like that, the city would be coming back to us for some help on Franklin Road or something like that, we might want to start reserving.
Or on the trades district in the future.
We might.
That's a good point.
We might want to start reserving against that. But in the absence of some relatively specific item, I don't know that that's necessary. But it seems to me those would be the sort of like the two situations, one of which doesn't apply to us and the other of which doesn't appear to be something that we know about now.
Yeah, I would agree that I do think if there were something in a future year that we knew, with virtual certainty it was going to be an expense, it would be prudent to, kind of factor that in now. But absent that, I think the reserve in the fund serves its purpose.
And I think each of those determinations would be probably pretty project specific if we knew something were part of a project that could come back later.
The second question, Jason, had to do with bookkeeping, if you will. How do we, and how often, how do we keep track of how we're performing against the budget, and how often do we need to look at that? Monthly, quarterly?
I think you can, I'll give examples of what we do with the civil city and the utility, which is monthly.
Okay.
So we do put out monthly budget reports, which will show what we've done for the month and year to date, and then compare that to the budget. Given the budget that's been outlined here, I don't know if it's necessary to do monthly, but it can certainly be done monthly because it would be just an extra, piece of paper probably in your monthly financial update, and it's certainly not that big of a deal to include that. So could do it monthly.
You can do that?
Yep.
Is that?
I think let's go ahead and do that if that's okay, and if it turns out to be more information than we need, turns out to be TMI. We'll ask, we can ask Jason to desist.
Oh, to use this as an example, in this month's, we have expense items which are charged against our budget. or would be charged
Yes.
against our budget. We also have notations of expense items that are not, which are grant monies, which you keep track of.
Yes,
But we never see,
yes.
okay? So would you pull those apart and update our budget then on a monthly basis?
Yes, and the grant-funded items, at least in this particular case, even though the RDC is approving them, they're not coming out of the financials on here.
Right.
They're in a separate grant fund. So right now, what you see is literal RDC funds being spent, and so that's what you would see in the budget report going forward also.
That sounds great to me. Commissioners, any, go ahead.
I think I misunderstood you. Were you saying that the charges against the Brownfield grant are actually coming out of RDC funds and then it's going to be reimbursed?
It's being charged out of a city grant fund, and then that grant fund gets reimbursed, so there aren't RDC funds going out the door first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible with things like the Brownfield grant to show what the original amount of the grant was and how much is still remaining?
I believe so. Do we have, Cam, the original
And
amount?
these don't even usually get to you. I correspond with Sean when our consultant puts together a stack of invoices for work that's been performed under the grant. They usually then also send an update that is very much, here's the amount remaining. The grant, and I mentioned I'm happy to circulate that if it's helpful or informative to you. I think one thing to point out is the grant is split between hazardous material sites and petroleum sites, so it can be a little confusing in that regard, but other than that, it does show how it's tracking, and that we get that, that's part of our contractor's responsibilities under our agreement with them. Yeah.
It would seem to me, maybe not every month, but at least on a quarterly basis, it would be good information to know where we stand in terms of how much of that money in each pot of the two pots has been used and how much is still available. Because historically, we have used that Brownfield grant a lot of times. And I don't remember how long it runs, but it does have an expiration date.
It does.
And at the expiration date, that doesn't mean that we still wouldn't have a requirement for that type of funding, which would then suggest that at some point we may need to apply for another grant.
Sure, and that is common to apply again. It's a competitive process, but the total grant's $400,000. It's a fiscal year 15 grant, so it runs through October of this year, and I think we are just under $100,000 left total on the grant. So I'm working with a consultant to identify sites to get those funds spent down. We can ask for an extension, but we'd rather not. We think we can get through that last bit, and then we'll negotiate closeout with EPA, and can certainly look at applying again.
So for the next meeting, do you produce that status?
Oh, sure, and I can circulate it in the meantime. It's,
Okay,
like I
that'd
said,
be
our
great.
consultant, our contract with that consultant says
That's
they
gonna
do
come
that.
from you.
And yeah, I'll circulate it from me.
Okay,
Sure.
that's not a Jason Fenwick.
No, I have it, and Sean in the controller's office has it, but I'm happy to circulate it to you.
Thank you.
As opposed to making her do it.
Thank you again for being here. And other questions for Jason? Okay, I appreciate you coming down.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Cam, I think we're to the staff report on, we can talk about East 59th Street.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a vote yet on approving claims.
Oh,
We haven't,
I am
believe we have.
oh, sorry.
That's what I just said.
Do I hear a motion for approving our claims? So moved by Commissioner Kimmery. May I have a second, please? And that would be Commissioner Sullivan. All those by show of hands. Thank you. Unanimous. Oh, it's my hearing aid.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Cam.
Sure.
Now we're going to East 59th Street.
Great, let's do that. And certainly this is a project we've talked about a fair amount in the past. We're close to having, and I would anticipate, the primary thing I want to say today is I would anticipate in April doing some meetings, sort of one-on-one or two-on-one, to go through a term sheet that would encapsulate kind of what we know the acceptable terms on the Meyer Plastic side would be, and what we think might be fair, subject to necessary approvals. The way the deal's kind of coming together, it will certainly take approvals from various bodies, this being one of them, the Common Council being another, and potentially even Metropolitan Development Commission downtown. So there will be, we're close to starting this sort of education process to talk through what the details are. But that will certainly include all of you. So I would anticipate in the next month, between now and our next meeting, that we'll be having some meetings about over a document that would kind of encapsulate the various terms and commitments that are currently being contemplated by the parties. We're very close to having a draft that would be good to talk about. So I would anticipate that. Again, just to encapsulate kind of that deal. It would be a new 100 to 110,000 square foot facility, headquarters for Meyer Plastics that does some custom moldings. It'd be their business office there at 10930 East 59th Street. And then some future development opportunities in that area too. So I had thought and really hoped that I might have the term sheet together that to even circulate today. It's not quite there. We have a couple of phone calls coming up in the next week. So I anticipate that will kind of get to a point where we can start to talk about the concrete terms and get some feedback and go from there. So that's the status on that one. Any questions?
Yes. If I could you say again when you're going to be holding meetings with the individual commissioners regarding this? Give me a time frame.
Sure, it'll be in April, between now and
Great.
our next meeting, ideally, dependent on calendars. I know it's spring break time, et cetera, and so hopefully I can catch you all. And not to promise necessarily that we'll be taking a vote at the next meeting, but as soon as we have kind of a concrete set of potential terms, I want to start having some dialogue with each of you. So it'll be.
And the vote we would take would be to proceed pending approvals? So what do we,
No, there will be aspects of this that the RDC will need to actually approve.
Okay.
There are other aspects that will need to be approved by other bodies and actually potentially.
okay, so this is going to be
It'll be a
time. Okay.
step at a time. We'll need various types of approvals. It's looking like so.
okay.
We'll be able to have some more detail when we meet on those on the.
Before we leave that, any other questions from the other commissioners? Okay, it sounds like it's going to be pretty involved.
Quick question. Do we have a business proposal from them, a written proposal? I mean, is there anything concrete at this point?
That'd be part of the term sheet. Yeah. It would encapsulate, it's really a two-way document that would say, here's what pending approvals we might do in terms of incentivizing this project and how it might come together. It would also say on their side, here's kind of the minimum commitments that we should expect in terms of capital investment, employment growth over time. And in that sort of due diligence period, we'll probably request some financial information from the company itself so we can look at their books a little bit. We do have a financial advisor that's part of the team that's helpful in that regard and doing projections. And so that will kind of be all in one place, which is why I want to have that in a position where it's good to talk about. Yeah.
At this point, have they submitted something to you as far as a proposal of some sort? I'm not asking to see it. I'm just asking
Right.
if you have something in your hands.
Just in draft form that we're back and forth about. That would be that term sheet document.
Cool.
And we've seen some potential site plans and renderings and things that I would probably add to the term sheet for informational purposes, so that we could see kind of where is the building and how does it lay out and what's it look like. And we do have, an information sheet that they gave us on the front end that has some details about their employees and median wage and things like that. That'll be part of the information.
I guess one thing I'd be kind of looking for is making sure that contractually that they're going to fulfill, whatever, terms that we put forth.
Mhm.
I'd hate to help build a building and then all of a sudden they say, well, we're not going to move our headquarters here. We're going to make this a satellite. We're only going to bring 50 people and not 110. Or, I want to make sure that we're dotting our I's here.
Certainly, and the term sheet will speak to those details, certainly, and would lead from there to an actual project agreement that would be executed by both parties. Term sheet really is kind of a summary. There will be a project agreement or an economic development agreement that will be a binding contract between the two bodies here, where those commitments will be made and executed, and there will be specific clawback provisions if those are not met, and will specify sort of almost like liquidated damages. Here's what happens if that falls short. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but remind me, Cam, of precisely what the RDC's role is in this transaction. I mean, this is a sale of property between two private parties, right?
It is, yes.
And so what is it that makes us a party to the transaction? I know you've told us this before, but I've had a birthday since then.
Of course. Oh, I understand. And there will be a couple of things that would be in sort of consideration of this commission, mostly surrounding any incentives that would be extended to the company to implement their new headquarters here. We did talk a little bit about one piece being an agreement to see out the site to environmental regulatory closure. There's the site's currently in a state program through IDEM. It had previously been used for manufacturing, had some impacts to soil and groundwater, most of which have been remediated. There's a need to carry out some additional sampling. I think it's currently looking like the purchase agreement between those two private parties provides that there will be funds, sale proceeds, escrowed to cover those costs.
Yes.
But the company is interested in having the city through the RDC step in to say, we will see that out, so that it's not something that goes on to the company itself in terms of legal responsibility, which we're looking at and looking to value, and have some good numbers on from our own environmental consultant, and there may be various other things that are sort of financing structures that we may look to participate in that we can talk more about, some of which may require approval from the Redevelopment Commission.
And funding from the Redevelopment Commission?
Yes, conceivably.
You good? Okay, there's, by way of review, there are two pieces. And I'm, to use a vernacular for a second, okay? One we've talked about several times, and that's backstopping the environmental part,
Sure.
okay? The part that's kind of unclear at this point in time, because we don't have a business proposal at this particular point in time. We have concepts of what could work. Would that be fair?
Right. I mean, that's part of our front-end work here, is to getting it to a point where it could be a complete proposal to then discuss in more detail. So I think that's...
I think their client is seeking participation in the project large, but that hasn't been defined at this point. So am I right? And that's kind of where it stands as of this date.
Right. I mean, our financial advisor is looking at some projections in terms of what it could look like, and that's partly what we're negotiating. Just even what would we even go to the trouble of taking to the Redevelopment Commission and the council in terms of participation based on what this project offers from a investment and jobs and economic impact standpoint. So that is very much what we're weighing. Should it meet the threshold, or we think, but should the various bodies approve this deal, we think these would be good terms. That's when we'll start to talk about the details of it.
I mean, it's just not there yet.
Close.
Close.
What are we being asked to agree to?
At this point, the only thing you're being asked to agree to, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is to meet with Cam as he can, and as this starts to, as this, I won't, as, I don't know what to call it, Cam, as this,
At this point, we're
as
just
this
doing-
opportunity,
We're doing negotiations.
as this opportunity begins to solidify,
Starts to firm up.
he's going to need to brief us and get us on board so that we can participate in it.
And
That's where we are.
see what we're willing to. vote for.
Exactly. It's not, nothing's been agreed to at this point.
Right.
Okay, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the only thing I would ask is watch for an email from me to maybe schedule a meeting that we can.
But it's going to have to be timely because you want to get all this, you're saying, I want to do this next month, which would be wonderful.
Well, no. I'm not saying that.
Oh.
I specifically said I'm not promising we'll be taking votes next month. We might as well start the process of talking about what
I
this
heard
deal-
April, I jumped on it.
April is, I think we will probably be in a window where we can start having those meetings in April.
Okay.
Well, as I understand it, as things become more concrete, you're going to need to know whether there are 3 votes for it or not.
Yeah, we'll certainly need to get there at some point.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So,
And not just.
all I would say is the earlier you can sort of start letting us know what we might be asked to vote for, the more informed you are going to be in your negotiations. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but.
No, exactly. Until we have sort of some baseline, it would be, I mean, things are continuing to change, so it'd just be, we'll be quickly in a window where I want to talk to you about the details of it, see what your thoughts are. You know, the negotiation will be ongoing unless and until we get approvals. And again, not just 3 votes here, but also votes on the council and votes of the Metropolitan Development Commission. I mean, there's a whole set of dominoes that have to fall if this is going to happen.
It just starts here.
It's right. We're close to the
Is there any
start.
kind of timeline that we're looking to stay within? That Meyer's looking to have things going?
It's a great question. If you asked Meyer, they would say tomorrow. So it's my understanding they now have a purchase agreement with the seller. So they're looking to move forward. Potentially, they're in a due diligence period of about 6 months. I think they'd love the opportunity to potentially be in the ground this year and get moving on the building. So we'll see. I think the private side of this is always in a hurry, and we've been clear that we can't be. We need to spend the time to look at the deal and see if it makes sense.
Trades District. If there's no other questions. No. We're going to have to watch our time, I think.
Sure. And Trades District, I think the main update from a general plan implementation standpoint is, if you'll recall, that we've talked to him about Record Street as a project, an infrastructure piece that would be positive in terms of carrying that plan forward towards implementation. We got to a point in conjunction with our Public Works Department that we could get some initial feedback from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the conduit for a lot of federal aid, road projects, or federal funding for infrastructure in central Indiana, including Lawrence. The feedback was in terms of criteria for various federal grant products that are out there. It didn't score well. Most of those grants are steered toward increasing capacity on roads where there's a lot of high traffic count that needs to be, which for better or for worse, and I think often enough for worse, infill projects like this that are project specific don't tend to score very well for those grants. So that was our initial negative feedback. We've kind of gone back to the drawing board. Public Works has I think they have an on-call agreement with an engineer that we've been able to talk about how would we maybe phase this project, or are there other funding mechanisms available. And so they've started to take another hard look at even the sections of the road in terms of width. And if we started with, a half mile toward Franklin Road and made that connection and then continued down further than the next year and broke it up like that, maybe it's more feasible from a funding standpoint. So we're hopeful that could lead to some additional ideas about how that project might get done. We continue to think it's very important, especially given that Record Street is currently interrupted awkwardly by a parcel there on Bragdon Street, which the RDC did acquire last year. So we own that piece that would be part of the right-of-way, but there's also probably an opportunity there to kind of enhance that roadway and add some streetscaping and pedestrian infrastructure to make it a little more positive connection to Franklin Road. So we're continuing to work on that. I just wanted to mention it as we've not let that go altogether. We just got some bad news from the MPO and had to regroup. So that's where that Record Street piece stands. Moving on, unless there's any objection to this, to the Lilly Arts Grant, is another thing I wanted to really just mention.
I'm sorry, before you move on, at the last meeting, we approved the expenditure of $30,000 to allow you to begin to develop the RFP for one site within the Trades District. And as part of that, the commissioners requested that as that RFP comes together, that the commissioner would like to review the RFP before it hits the street. That's another instance where Cam's going to have to meet with us and educate us on what's contained in the RFP, as not just the acquisition of the property, but also the expectations, to your point earlier, of the owner of that property, that they would take on certain responsibilities along with the ownership of, and so that's another, I just wanted to mention that.
I have that item down here under new business, so I was saving it, but it probably doesn't belong there. It's not a vote that we're taking. So to add it to staff report, yes, I'm beginning to work on some terms that would be part of a request for proposals that we would advertise for the site. And it's something that I'm happy to, I thought it might make more sense to just sort of circulate that so you can see the language as opposed to hand it out at the meeting and sort of talk over it and take a lot of time that way. That way you can read it, send me questions, and have some feedback. I would anticipate these items being sort of the main aspects of that request for proposals to ensure that we get the kind of responses that we want to see that are consistent with the Trades District plan. I would contemplate that we would attach that plan to the request for proposals for reference. And I think we would want to really focus on proposals that would take down the entire 3¼ acres there to look for an impactful development right along Pendleton Pike as part of an anchor to the Trades District plan. I think we'd want a minimum investment of probably $1 million per acre or more just in terms of productivity. There's 3¼ acres there. I would think we wouldn't want to settle for less than a $3 million project, and hopefully more than that. And I think that amount of acreage probably supports a good number of jobs. So we probably want to even bake into the request for proposals a minimum employee count of I think probably 50 per acre. It's 150. Again, hopefully we'd overshoot that. But I would call your attention to, I'll circulate some language for you to consider as I draft it, but I would call your attention to those specific things as criteria for potential proposals that we might receive on this site that are really designed to screen out the sort of gas station I don't think that's what we want there, or quick service restaurant. We've gone to the trouble of putting together this nice plan. We'd like to make sure that this is developed in a way that's consistent with that plan. I think it starts with the RFP. So I'll be drafting that language and circulating it. If there are questions or need to meet, we can certainly do that before we advertise it.
Yeah, thanks for,
Sure. No, we can
kind of
jump
jumped ahead
out.
on
It
that.
makes more sense
The reason I did was because.
this way anyway.
I'm concerned with with the amount of time the commissioners are going to be you're engaging the commissioners on several fronts over the next month, I think. And,
Right.
yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any questions for Cam on that point?
It's 3 acres?
3 1/4 between there are 3 parcels there. That's the total.
Somebody asked me that yesterday, and I couldn't quite remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so now to the Lilly grant.
Yes, and this is it's something I just wanted to mention in case you sort of hear this. That the Lilly Endowment has set aside $25 million as a specific grant related to arts and culture and increasing access to the arts, particularly in Marion County. That's certainly not an unheard of chunk of money from the endowment, but it is sizable enough that it gets some people talking. And actually, the maximum award to any one project is $10 million. But because I would hate for any of you to hear that there's a grant out there and have to wonder, is Lawrence even thinking about it? I want to let you know that we in partnership with Arts for Lawrence, we are pursuing a grant under this funding product from the Lilly Endowment in a very intentional way. Pulled together some good partners for local to here, including Schneider Engineering and Context Design, that's looking at a new office location in the former PX over here on Lawton Loop. They've both been very engaged in this process and happy to contribute some thoughts and some planning and are sort of. The first phase of this is a kind of a project summary due March 31st with the budget and some sketches about what the plan would be. It centers around creating a sort of a cultural campus, we're calling it, between the Starrett Center and the theater and Otis Avenue in front of it, and even the parking lot behind it being restructured to incorporate some more green space, some more opportunity for public art, some improvements to both of those public facilities. Of course, the theater and the Starrett Center are both owned by the city of Lawrence and our public facilities. So that would be an improvement to those buildings and the space around them, and maybe even some provision for quasi-permanent infrastructure to close the street for various festivals. I don't know if any of you have attended the Christmas tree lighting that's hosted there on Otis Avenue, but focusing on making that look like a destination type of area for events and community gatherings and things like that. So it's all lining up to be very positive. I'm sure the grant will be extremely competitive, as these things often are, but we are seizing the opportunity to really put forth something that I think would be a large-scale project and very positive for the area. So I just wanted you all to know that. It's nothing that there's will be no financial ask or commitment from the Redevelopment Commission itself. This is just an informational PSA, so to speak.
Is there anything the Redevelopment Commission can do to help? I mean, from endorsing it to, it seems to me like this is something that the broader the support that the applicants have, the greater their likelihood is of being funded. And I don't know what it would be, but
even a letter of
certainly,
sure.
we'd certainly pass a resolution endorsing this, or pledging our cooperation with it as it grows into our catchment area, or I don't know, but
yes,
it's you've got, I don't know, you put Clifford's name and Emery's name and Hicks's name and stuff on a document, it's going to turn heads at the Lilly Endowment.
Sure.
I don't know about you and me, David, but
I mean, I think we just need David to sign it. Just that, I mean, nobody else. He can write his own letter. That should be it.
You're in an unusual mood this afternoon.
I appreciate the suggestion. I'm pretty sure that this initial phase, project summary phase, they've specifically asked to not receive letters of support. It's a very concise sort of 5-page document with a maximum 90-second video, which has been prepared. It's looking good. So, I mean, we'll use our space well there. If we are selected to then apply, there will certainly be need for letters of support, resolutions to be passed in support. I appreciate your willingness to consider such a thing. I would tell you that if we get to that point, I would most likely be coming to you with probably at least those two things. I don't think there's a way or even a need for, there's not a match requirement. So there's no need for us to commit money, but to say we support this and authorize me to write a letter that you can all sign, sure. Those things do all help.
And the video that Cam referred to that will accompany the proposal, I received a copy of it late this afternoon, I mean literally right before the meeting started. And I'll share that with you as soon as.
Are you in it?
No. Just keep it up. Anything else, Cam, on that?
No.
Questions?
Just FYI.
Oh, okay, great. So we're to new business, are we now?
We are.
Okay, item on the item remaining on new business is the opening of proposals for purchase of 4423 Shadeland Avenue. Do we have a bid to open? And the process that we go through on this is that we will open the bid, determine who the bid came from, and we will then hand the bid to Cam and ask Mr. Starnes to score the bid and make recommendations concerning how the commission should act. So if we can. And this is only one bid received.
Okay.
Is that correct? And the bid is from ServiceMaster Restore.
Okay.
Is that correct? At 44, regarding the 4423 North Shadeland.
Okay. You're the first to see it, so.
I assume that's who it's from.
And yes, I'm happy to sort of summarize then, given that it's one and not several to score. I'm happy to summarize sort of the key terms there and present it at the April meeting in a concise way for consideration by the Redevelopment Commission as whether it wants to sort of award the project, and then I would see that probably heading toward a document that would speak to the arrangement in terms of selling the property and any commitments that the RDC would seek as a result of awarding the property for sale.
And just for the record, I think I better read the proper name of the bidder. It's ServiceMaster by Crossroads Restoration Services, LLC.
Thank you.
And we'll hand this to Cam. Thank you.
Cam, by statute or ordinance, do we have a timeline to respond to that?
I don't know that we do. It's really up to us as to when we respond. David drafted the RFP. I'll double check to be sure there in the instructions or the various documents there wasn't a timeline specified there. But yeah, normally I think we'd take the intervening time between this and the next meeting to at least summarize this. And absent some other commitment that we made through the RFP to be quicker and therefore, which would really necessitate a special meeting, I would think that we would, I'd be prepared to present to you in April and take a vote as to, yes, we want to move forward and go from there.
If there is no other business to come before the commission at this point, Frank? Commissioner Sullivan?
Looks like maybe we got a minute or two here.
You do.
Could I just ask just a question, a general question of information? I heard the other day that the city of Lawrence was the only one of the excluded cities in Marion County, which hasn't, if I remember what I was told correctly, that hasn't opted out of the stormwater control by the city of Indianapolis. That Beech Grove and Southport and Speedway have all opted out, by which they got some money, they get some money, and they sort of do their own thing with stormwater, whereas we are continuing to do it in conjunction with the city or something like that. I'm sure that that's a very imprecise way of describing it. But I remember we've talked from time to time about some stormwater issues, especially down in that area that we've been talking about, the Pendleton Pike property. And so it sort of caught my attention when I heard somebody say this. And that maybe this is a matter for discussion at some other time, but if this is something that, it's sort of interesting to me to know what the calculus, and I'm sure that maybe this dates back many administrations, but what the calculus was, and I'm not even saying that I'm skeptical that, I mean, it seems to me part of the whole idea of Unigov is doing stuff together. So this may be the very, it may be precisely what we ought to be doing. But it just, particularly since we've talked from time to time about stormwater runoff issues down in that Pendleton area, it sort of caught my attention. And if not now, at some time we'd have a discussion about this, I'd be interested.
Well, I think two things on the more overarching policy kind of level regarding how that operates and why and who opted out and who didn't. I'm afraid I'm out of my depth to really speak to that. I do know that Lawrence residents do pay into the Marion County Stormwater District. That is true. I don't think I was aware that the other excluded ones have opted out now. Again, I'm not entirely clear on how that works. But I can speak to the area that concerns some projects that we hope to do and some progress we hope to see in our sort of allocation area and overall. Just within the last year, I believe, if not two at the most, the city of Lawrence as an entity has struck an agreement, really an interlocal agreement with the Stormwater District that speaks to the need to catch up the city of Lawrence with regard to projects. While the residents have paid into the Stormwater District, there's not been a lot of infrastructure work performed out here. And I think that was the impetus behind seeking an agreement that would make some commitments to fund some projects here. There are four, I believe, at least three, and I think a fourth, that are currently committed to by the Stormwater District in terms of funding in Lawrence city boundaries, including two one in the Trades District and one just across the railroad tracks, all of which has a similar low-lying topography such that it tends to hold water. So both of those projects have been scoped, approved, they have funding approved, and are moving forward. They're both under, I believe, have been awarded to engineering companies, to two separate ones, if I'm not mistaken, and are proceeding on a timeline such that those two, at least the one in the Trades District, should start in 2018 and would include some stormwater improvements and specifically addressing, there's a large drainage pipe along the railroad bed that I believe will be unearthed and replaced or clear. It's pretty filled in with earth to our understanding. That's been investigated. So there will be a project in the very near term that will improve stormwater in the Trades District area. through that project and the one across the tracks, both of which are somewhat related. And then there's at least one other in another area of the city that I've been less concerned with, given that it doesn't touch areas where we have projects currently. But that is the current situation, is we do have an agreement to fund some projects and some projects that have been identified, scoped, and are moving forward. So as to the bigger questions about how that district works and how it interacts with Unigov and excluded cities, and I would tell you this is, to my knowledge, one of the ways that Lawrence is not excluded, because we do pay in to that district. Bruce, sure.
Chairman,
Go ahead. I was wondering if you were going to chime in on this.
let me see if I can give you a 2-minute synopsis. Everybody in the city of Lawrence pays stormwater tax that goes to Marion County. By the city county council's resolution, that money can only be spent on stormwater projects that directly benefit or actually done within the city of Lawrence. For about 10 years, that wasn't done. And the Marion County Stormwater Group spent that money in other places. The city agreed through the interlocal agreement, which I am not sure the exact dollar amount, but the discussion amount was somewhere between $7 and $9 million worth of projects that they needed to do within the city of Lawrence just to get to repay the money that had been inappropriately spent in other portions of Marion County. And the project that Cam just talked about is the first one of those projects. And it's my understanding there's supposed to be others that are in the pipeline for that. There was an attempt by previous city administrations to withdraw from the stormwater district. Common Council would not agree to that and said it would be best for the city to stay in the stormwater district. You can make an argument on either side of that, but that's the reason that we're still in it. And if all these things work out the way they're supposed to work out, then the city will not have been harmed by the lack of proper expenditures of money that should have been spent in the city of Lawrence. So anyway, that's a...
Okay, one of the issues, and you and I were in this, we had, how do I want to say this? Trying to get to the bottom of what happened on Franklin Road and several other projects, Commissioner Kimmer and I met with Bill Anthony, and Bill spent an enormous amount of time piecing all that together for us. As part of that process, we learned about all the project work that he had done with the city to initiate these stormwater projects that were never initiated and were never managed. Okay? And as a consequence of that, the city of Lawrence now has a lot of projects underway, 2 of which directly impact our trades district, which we actually heard about a year ago in Bill's office as he scoped those for us. Suggestion would be, since it's been about a year, is to ask Bill to participate in one of our meetings in the not too distant future. Take 10 minutes and bring us up to date on the projects, especially those 2 that have direct impact on the trades district, if he's willing to do that. So
I think that would be a really good suggestion and education for the commission.
Okay.
Sure.
Other matters?
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Other matters that are interested? No? Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Just one issue, cannot make the next meeting.
I mentioned, you. I have already written that down. Okay. But thanks for mentioning it. May I have, did you second then of the adjournment? The motion?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
While he's at it.
No fans. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Day of March 2018. All members are present, so we do have a quorum. And the minutes were sent to you by email. I would entertain a motion that the minutes be approved.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Payment of claims. The claims were sent to you by email. Entertain a motion that the claims be approved for payment.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion regarding the claims? If not, all those in favor of payment of the claims, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The claims are approved for payment. Report of the utility superintendent.
Good evening.
Evening.
So not a lot on the agenda tonight, so I'll just get through the highlights of the report. All our projects are moving forward on schedule and good progress is being made. The sanitary sewer CIPP lining was supposed to start today. The rain kind of delayed that. You might see the pictures I handed out. I actually come from an 8-inch main on Franklin Road, which is one of the mains that's being rehabilitated with CIPP lining on this project. And so that just kind of underscores the need for why we really need to get aggressive on our sewer main projects. With regard to the Trades District project too, there's going to be a change order coming on that. It's actually a deduct on the project. If you recall, we had approved some easements earlier. That was to allow that main, the new main, the reroute of Plummer Street main to be done outside of the right-of-way or the pavement, which is lowered the cost on that project by about 10,000 or more. So at any rate, our hope is that we'll free up some money there to allow additional pipe segments to be done as part of the overall project. The Cooley project, the manhole project is just about wrapped up. Again, we've on that project managed to come out ahead on the project financially, so we're going to be adding additional manhole work on that too, which we should be getting quotes in from our contractor to add manholes, specifically like Wheeler Road, and I think in the State Park is the areas where we're looking where we have some manholes with problems. We'll be working on moving forward with Lift Station 19, finalization of those plans and getting that project whipped into shape. And then recently we've had our well 15 and well 8 have been cleaned. Both wells had some issues that incurred some additional costs, but of course that was covered we had that money budgeted in the budget, in our well budget to handle. We always build in extra because you never know when you're going to have a pump problem or some other kind of problem. And so those are being resolved. Other than that, it's just business as usual.
Okay. Any questions?
What size diameter pipe did you say that was?
That's an 8-inch.
Anything
You
else?
said it would be fixed, I think, this week.
Yes, that's one of the pipe segments that Miller Pipeline will be doing. They're actually in that area there. They'll do what's an internal point repair first and then line through that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jason, do you want to give us some report on the finances?
Sure. I think these were sent, the February financials were sent out last week, and I'll be brief, but wanted to give a quick update in particular on the water utility. So through the end of February, the water operating fund now has an operating balance of a little over $900,000. Probably more importantly, we have now, the water utility has paid $1,250,000 in total back to the sewer utility in the loan that was outstanding. So there's $250,000 remaining to be paid, and we expect that will occur yet this month. So I do expect the sewer utility to be repaid in full at the end of this month. And we also, as of the end of February, have a balance in the Water Capital Improvement Fund of $900,000, which is by far the most that fund has had in 5 years. We're certainly not where we need to be in that fund in terms of the optimal funding, but we're definitely way ahead of schedule from where we thought we would be 6 months ago, and in particular on the repayment of that sewer loan. So all things being considered, I think the water utility is definitely financially on the mend, and we're ahead of schedule, and I think there are funds available to actually start doing some ongoing projects as a result of the increase from last year.
Okay. Any questions?
That transfer or paying off the sewer stuff allows the sewer utility to
Absolutely.
meet their obligations or meet some of the projects they want to do also.
Absolutely, and we were hopeful that we'd be able to have that repaid by the end of this year. So to have it repaid in full by the end of this month is a great outcome for both utilities.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I do not believe we have any unfinished business, and under new business, there's a reference to covenant approval. Actually, we do not have a covenant to be approved, so to my knowledge, we don't have any new business. So account adjustments. We have an account adjustment request.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. We have three this evening. 7822 East 46th Street. Customer is requesting an adjustment in the amount of $1,373.21 on the sewer portion of the bill due to the water service line break. The water did not enter the sewer, and we do recommend approval. 8822 East 45th Street. Customer is requesting an adjustment in the amount of $258.05 in the sewer portion of the bill due to a water line break under the home. The leak water did not enter the sewer, and we do recommend approval. 5220 Bogey Drive. Customer is requesting an adjustment in the amount of $442.65 in the sewer portion of the bill due to vandalism to an outside spigot. The water did not enter the sewer. A police report was filed, and the locking spigot was installed, and we do recommend approval.
Okay. I would entertain a motion that those three account adjustments be approved.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
The first one had a pretty high amount. What was their water bill? It'd be more than that even, probably.
I don't know exactly how much their water was. I only bring the sewer. Yeah. Well, they had a bill of $2,216. Yeah, so it was big.
I feel sorry for them, but you gotta kind of watch for those things.
I know.
You could hear it leaking or something.
You would think.
Okay. Anything further? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Those are approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Demonstration of ratepayer dispute regarding disconnect notice. I don't believe we have anyone here for that. Citizens' comments. Seeing none, we'd entertain a motion that we adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.